Hilchas Maisa Hakarbanos Perek Hasiri. So until now the Rambam was discussing the Seder HaKrovis of the Korbanos, of the Oila and the Chatas and the Shlam and the Asham, the Seder HaKrovim and the Lachmi Teda, how you make the Lachmi Teda. Now the Rambam is going to start discussing the halachas of the mitzvahs, the mitzvah of eating the Korbanos. Perek Hasiri. Achilas HaChatas v'Hasham mitzvah sasei. Now the Chatas and the Asham are Kodesh Gadashim, so they are eaten only by the Kenim. So achilas hachatas v'hasham mitzvah asay, shenamar v'ochlu esom asher kupar b'hem, which is a pasuk which says v'nigeya the shivas mi'ameluyim that the Kenim eat v'ochlu esom asher kupar b'hem. So we learn out hakenim eichlim ubaylim miskaprim. That's a din v'nigeya all kodesh gadashim that hakenim eichlim ubaylim miskaprim. They affect the kapara through their eating. V'hu adin l'sh'ara kodshim. This is the kachim which only the kenim eat, which is referring to kachim kadashim shachilasim mitzvah. That is this mitzvah v'achlu esam asher kupar b'hem. Now b'negeh the kachim kalim also the kenim eat the chaz of a shake. So that also the Rambam brings in the Sefer HaMitzvahs that it's a mitzvah for them to eat, but not this mitzvah. This mitzvah v'achlu esam asher kupar b'hem is referring only to kachim kadashim. Masha'inkin, there's another mitzvah that is the seder of the Kochim Kalim, so part of the Akrav of the Kochim Kalim also demands that the Kenim should eat their portion, which is the Chaz of a Sheikh. V'chein, Achilas Shiari Menachis is also mitzvah sasei. Shenemar v'aniseres mimenu yechel an rubanav, was Menachis is also Kochim Gadashim, but it's not part of this mitzvah of V'achlu Eisam Asher Kupar B'hem, which is only B'negea, the Achilas of Kochim of a Behema, but rather, Shiari Menachas, there's a separate mitzvah, V'aniseres mimenu yechlu an rubanav. Now, V'ein Chatus Halacha Gimel, V'ein Chatus V'osham U'Shiari Menachas, Necholin Ela L'Zichri Kahuna and Ba'azor. So it's two tanoim. It has to be Zichri Kahuna and it has to be Ba'azor. V'im Nechlu B'Hechel is also Nechlu. Shenamar, L'chol Minchosam, U'L'chol Chatosam, U'L'chol Ashamam, Ba'Kedesh HaKadoshim Tichlanu. So since Kol Zocher Yechel Eisei, so this since it says Ba'Kedesh HaKadoshim, so Ba'Kedesh HaKadoshim means the Kedesh which is more Kedesh than the Azor. The Kedesh HaKadoshim which also includes the Heichel. So if they ate, in the Heichel was also Heichel, it was like Kedin. V'chein Shalmi Tzibur, is Arein Kechatus V'Osham K'meshe B'Yanu. So there's the Kodesh Kadoshim. Kodesh Kadoshim is a Chatos, and a Osham, and a Shalmi Tzibur. That's as far as behemoths are concerned. And Benegeh, that's a Chatos, an Osham, and a Shalmi Tzibur. And as far as Menachas, and also Menachas, the Shiari HaMenachas also have a din of Kodesh Kadoshim, and they are all eaten L'Zichri Kahuna, only to Scharim of Kenim, and also they have to be eaten Ba'azor. Halacha Dalet, Chazav Sheikh Shel Truma, is Necholim L'Kenim, Scharim and Nekevis. This is Kodesh Kadoshim are only Necholim L'Scharim. But Kochim Kalim, the Chazav Sheikh, which they get from the Kochim Kalim, that's also only eaten L'Kenim, but it's also Scharim Unekevis. Shenamar B'hem, L'Chon Nesatem, U'Levanecha, V'Livnei Secha. V'chein Hamuram Miteda V'Hamuram El Nazar. So that refers to the Chalas, which are taken from the Teda and the El Nazar. So that also is eaten L'Kenim, and also Livneim V'Livnei Seim. Shenamar, Kol Trumis HaKodeshim, Asher Yirim B'nei Yisrael Hashem, Nosati L'cha, U'Levanecha, V'Livnei Secha. So that includes all the Trumis HaKodeshim, which the Bnei Yisrael give to the Kenim, which is the Chaz of a Sheikh, and al deras of the Chalas Teda, and al deras of the Chalas of the El Nazar. All of it is given to the Kenim, and they can be eaten side the Banecha and side the Nexecha. The Chen HaBcher, the Bcher, which is also Shaykhus to the Kenim, Shari Nemar Bey, Ubsarim Yilecha, Kechazeyat Nufa, Keshek HaYomen. So Bekitzer, so we're learning here that the Kochim Kalim, which are given to the Kenim, so the Kochim Kalim, so Kochim Kadoshim says only eaten L'Zichri Kahun, and has to be Bazar. Masha'inkin Kochim Kalim, they could be eaten not only L'Zichri Kahun, but also to the daughters of the Kenim. And Al Deras that says Kochim Kalim refers to the Chaz of Sheikh, and Amurim and Ateda, Me'el Nazar, and also the Bcher. Now the Rambam continues, V'chol Elo HaNecholim L'Kenis, are also Necholim La'avdi Keim Ul N'Shem. They could be eaten by a Bas Keim. Once you establish they could be eaten to a Bat Keim, they could also be eaten by an Eved of a Keim, and also an Eshes Keim, Kit Truma. That's number one. So who could eat it? You could eat it, say a Bas Keim, say an Eshes Keim, and say an Eved Keim. And v'chulon necholon b'chol ha'ir. Where could it be eaten? B'chol ha'ir. Shnemer is chazei atnufa v'sheik truma teichlu b'mokum tor. So linemer ben b'mokum kodeshi hazara. Elator shehu kol machne Yisrael. So Torah over there refers to kol machne Yisrael, a place where a Mitzvah can go in. Shekaneg the L'deiris is Yerushalayim. So we're learning over here that the Chaz of Sheikh and the Murim and Ateidim El Nazar and the Pcher all could be eaten to a Bas Kain and to Eishes Kain and to an Evet Kain, and they could all be eaten in Yerushalayim. Who adin leMaiser Pesach. Maiser Pesach has the same din. Sharein Kochem Kalim Kishlomim. And Memela they have the same din like a Pcher and the Chaz of Sheikh and the Murim and Ateidim El Nazar. V'achalenis v'uvi achema kulifnim. Chalenis is you have a chalein in the wall. So if you're standing inside the chalein, let's say in the thickness of the chalein, now that is a uvi achema means on top of the chema. If you're standing on top of the wall, so that top of the wall or inside those in the uvi achema, that all has a din of lifnim, and that's negeh side to Yerushalayim and side to the Azara. You know, say if you're standing on top of chemes Yerushalayim or on top of or inside a chalein, which is in chemes Yerushalayim, and al der zeh benegeh if you're standing on the chemes Azara or in the chalein of the Azara. On the Azara, the aliyas le'niskachu. So you have to know exactly how it would work out. Benegeh the Azara, benegeh eating on top of the chemes Azara. That would go into the gather of aliyas le'niskachu. Halacha vav hashlomim. Now till now we learned who could eat it and where it could be eaten. Now the shaila when. Now hashlomim necholim b'yom azvicha v'chol alayla. And also v'chol yom hamachris at shetishkacham. A shlomim could be eaten the day it's shechted, the following night, and also the day following that. Shenamar b'yom akrivi yizivcha yiyachel umi macharas. And then it says v'im ha'achel yiyachel v'sar zevach shlomim v'yom ha'shlishi v'shaliv gamer. So b'yom ha'shlishi starts already from the following night. In other words, even though b'negeh kotchim is alayla hilach achrayim, but b'negeh this din of achilas kotchim, so we say from the following night it's already usher. You could only be eaten the day you were makriv it, the night afterwards, and the day afterwards, but not the night afterwards. The tzas lomat shein necholim l'shnei yomim v'layla echad. And that din is bein chelik hakeinim, bein chelik habaylim. Everything could be eaten only for shnei yomim v'layla echad. Hu adin l'pcher u'maiser, sharim kotchim kalim kishlomim, so they have the same din like shlomim, that necholim l'shnei yom v'layla echad. There's nachamol the shlomim, the pcher and the maiser, are nechol l'shnei yom v'layla echad. Aval ateda, aval pi alacha zayin aval ateda, aval pi shi kotchim kalim, and l'chur it's also a shlomim, but it's a shlom with lechem, but nevertheless, einen nechelis ele b'yem azvicham alayla. That's more chomer, and that could only be eaten the day you shechted, plus the night that follows it. Shenamar ba b'yem karbani yiyachel, le yaniach menu ad beker. V'chein el nazar, v'halachem haboim moim u'keisvem, the el nazar, which also has the lechem, so that shlomim, that shlom also has a din that it's only nechel l'yem v'layla. And that refers to ben chelik hakeinim, ben chelik habaylim. So side the chelik hakeinim which they eat, which is benegea teda, is the side the chazan, side the sheikh, and the lachmi teda. And al derzeh by el nazar, it's the chazan and it's the sheikh, and it's also the shtei lechamim, which you're mafresh to from the lachmi of the nazar. And over there, there's the zreya b'sheila, which is an addition that the kohen gets the zreya b'sheila from the el nazar. So all of that is only eaten liyom v'layla. V'hu adin lechatus u'l'asham u'l'shal mitzibur u'l'shiari menachas, which means bekitzer all types of kotche kadashim which are eaten, which is nacham al chatos and asham and shal mitzibur and shiari menachas, which is all the kotche kadashim which are eaten. Shahakel nechel liyom v'layla. Shnamar b'yem karbani yachol, which on that means bekol karbanis m'mashma chutz min hashlam shepirish b'makasav. And also, so there's a pasuk that says, B'yem Karbani Yachal, so B'yem Karbani Yachal refers to all Karbanis, which means all Kachik Adashim is only B'yem Karbani Yachal. And also the following night. That's why Nesimeno Ad Beki, you're not allowed to wait until the following morning. But the Yem Karbani plus the following night. B'negei Shlom, it says Mefurish, that Shlom can be eaten also Umi Macharas. And B'negei Meiser, B'cher and Meiser is Dagdaimim. lishlamim. So therefore, we also learn out that they're also eaten mimachras. Is bekitzer. Kachik kalim, shlamim, and pcheru meiser could be eaten the day you eat it, and the following night, and the following day. Shnei yom v'layla echad. A toida and the el nazir are only liyom v'layla. Are only liyom v'layla. Now there is all kachik kadoshim, which is a chatos and a osham, and zivchi shal mitzibur, and al there is a menachas. They're all only eaten liyom v'layla. Yeah. Now kol elu an necholim liyom v'layla is din teira shein necholim ad sheyala med hashachar. Be'etzim you're allowed to eat it kol alayla. Aber kedei laharchik min haveira amru chachamim she'ein necholim ela ad chatzeis halayla, that they should only be eaten ad chatzeis halayla. So again, over here in this lashon she'ein necholim ela ad chatzeis halayla, the pastor mashmois could mean that after chatzeis halayla you're not allowed to eat it, or it could mean that in necholim ad chatzeis halayla that they shouldn't be eaten ela ad chatzeis. But b'diavad, if they were, it's after chatzeis, then they could be eating it. The same shayla b'neged that we had. B'neged the Haktorah Seimurim, so we said the Shagasari was medayik that the Haktorah Seimurim you don't do after Chatzes, and we mentioned that others argue with the Shagasari, and they tell you that that's not the pshat, that the Amis L'Chatchili you're supposed to do it until Chatzes, but with the Yevid you can do it after Chatzes. Now there is that b'neged this issue, b'neged Achilas Kotchim, Halacha Tes, Kol Hakarbanos, Ben Kotchim Kadoshim, Ben Kotchim Kalim, Ein oichel noisen ella haterim bilvat. In order to eat kachim, first of all, you have to be a tor, and also hamulin, you have to be a mohul. Nafilu herev shimshei v'lehevi kaparase. If a person was already, he was tamei and then he became tor, and he was herev shimshei, it's already la'acher, he's already tor. Aber lepel is lehevi kaparase. He's from the tmeim that are mechusri kapara. They still need a kapara in order to have the gemar of the tahara. So even though he's allowed to eat truma, like we learned, that someone that's a full yain, someone that's had of shimshei, even though he didn't bring his kaparase, so he's allowed to eat truma. Truma he's not allowed to eat, but on the other hand, kachim he's not allowed to eat. He ain't echel bekachim because he's mechusik kapara. Now v'hatumtum, someone that's a tumtum, it's a suffix zachar sachar nikeva, and if he's a zachar, he's not a mole. Is that tumtum also lechel bekachim lefishu safik aru, because by him a tumtum is covered, so maybe you don't know if he's a zachar in the cave, and later tzad that he's a zachar, so he's an aru. Aval andregas is someone that has both simonim, so maybe he has simoni zachrus, and that simoni zachrus he's a mole. On the other end, he has simoni nakos. It's not clear if he's a zachar in the cave, but later tzad that he's a zachar, so he's a mole. Aval andregas yiroli she'echel bekachim kalim. He can eat kachim kalim. He can't eat kachim kadoshim because he's a suffix zachar. He doesn't have a din of a zachar, and a kachim kadoshim could only be eaten lezichri kuna. Mashenkin kachim kalim, which could also be eaten to a bas. So manavshach, if l'tzad that he's a zachar, he's a mole, and l'tzad that he's a bas, so he's also mutter. That's din. So you're allowed to eat. So tell you when you're allowed to eat. When you're allowed to eat the kachim. It says depending on kachim kalim, kachim kadoshim, and kachim kalim gufa, depending if it's the shlamim or the teda, and then also who eats it. The person has to be dafka a mole and a tor. Halacha yud. Mutar lechel is hakachim b'chol meichel. They said b'negei Pesach there's a din has to be eaten tzoli. B'negei also b'negei the korbanos that the kohanim eat, where it says lemoshcha, so it says dera gedula. So also there's a din that should be eaten tzoli, but that's only if the kohen enjoys it eating tzoli. Mashengen, if the kohen prefers eating it in a different manner, it's not the yikuva that he has to eat it tzoli. That's what the Ram is saying. Mutar lechel is hakachim b'chol meichel. Afilu hakenim is mutar and lechel chelkim, even though over there it says lemoshcha and dera gedula, but nevertheless mutar and lechel chelkim bein mikotchi kalim, bein mikotchi kadoshim b'chol meichel. They could do any meichel. They don't have to do everything the same. They can do part of it this way and part of it a different way. Either roasted or cooked, or different types of cooking. And they can put in the spices of chulin into the food into the basar of kachim. They shouldn't put truma tavlin into the basar of kachim. Why? Because lepel connecting truma with kachim is limited. It's limited how much you could eat it. So maybe if you're not going to eat it bismana, you're not going to be able to eat it. So it comes out that you're taking truma and you're being ma'amid. The truma that doesn't have a time limit. You can eat as long as you want. Masha'inkin, by putting this truma and mixing it together with kachim, you're taking truma and putting a time limit on how long this truma could be eaten. That's the number one. Va'atzamas hanisharis, when a person, when they're eating kachim, so the bones that are left over after you finish eating is mutaris. Ve'esa adam lehem kol kelim shir. So knows the bones don't have any kedusha. So once you eat the meat of the bones, so that bones could be used for whatever you want. Now, hoysela machilim mu'etzes, there wasn't a lot of basar to eat. Is also derech, knows to eat it, derech gdula is to eat it ala seva, knows to eat it and to become satiated from it. So mele eichel imach chulin utrumas, you eat with, besides the basar, kachim which you eat, you should also eat chulin utrumas, kedei sheyeh necheles imasove, know that it should be eaten in a way that when you're finished eating it, you're satiated from it. Masha'inkin, if you're going to eat it, and at the end you're going to end up being hungry, that's not eating a derech gdula. However, if you have a lot of basar, so then you don't eat besides the kachim other things. The same thing applies to shiar menachos. You're supposed to eat the kachim. There's no hagbal of what type of food, how you should eat the kachim. You can eat the kachim roasted, you can eat it cooked, etc., etc. You could put in spices into it. Don't put in spices shel truma, because you're taking this truma and you're making it limited of how long you'll be able to eat this truma, because the kachim could only be eaten in a specific time. And also, if you have a lot of it, so don't eat any other foods, because you don't want it to eat achila gasa. When a person eats and he overeats, so mainly the food that he's eating, so if he mamish overeats, so it could be mamish not a din achila. It could be considered achila gasa to the extent where it's not even achila. And even if he's not mamish to the extent where it's not mamish achila, but it's certainly not a preferable achila, it's not derech gdula. Masha'inkin, if he has very little, so he shouldn't eat it and remain hungry. He should eat it beifun that this food is making him satisfied, making him satiated, and that's only when he adds either truma or chulin, he adds together with the food, and memela, when he ends up finishing eating this food, he's eating a derech seva. Halacha yud beis. Now we mentioned you shouldn't eat truma, put truma spices into the kachim, because you're being magbal the truma. Notice now the truma could only be eaten for a certain amount of time, and if the kachim is going to become noiser, so you're not going to be able to eat the truma, so you're, so to speak, ruining the truma. Al derazeh b'negeh the kachim itself, and the kachim have different time limits, and if you're taking something which has a greater amount of time, and you're making it that it should have a lesser amount of time, that's also, you're now let it cause that kachim should have a lesser amount of time, and also a lesser space of eating. Whereas kachim kedoshim could only be eaten bazor. Kachim kalim could be eaten also in all of Yerushalayim. So if you're going to take something which you're going to cause it to be a lesser amount of time to eat, or a lesser place to eat, so that's something you're not supposed to do. That's what the Rambam says, halacha yud beis. Ein mevashlim chatusi osham, imuram mitoida me'el nozer. Now the toida and the el nozer are both of them also only liyem v'layla, and the chatus and osham is yem v'layla. However, the chatus and the osham could only be eaten by zichri kahuna. The osham and the toida, the el nozer, could be eaten also by the bas kain, or the eishes kain, or the eved of the kain. Mipnei, and also the chatus and the osham could only be eaten the azar. And masha'enkin, the teid and the el nazar could be eaten in all of Yerushalayim. So memela, by taking this chatus and osham and cooking it together with the teid and el nazar, you're being magbal the teid and el nazar. You're causing that the teid and the el nazar shouldn't be able to be eaten by a bas kain, and also shouldn't be able to eat in Yerushalayim. That's number one. And also, you shouldn't cook these two together, the teida and the el nazar, with the bcher and the chazav v'sheik shel shlam. Why? You're causing that the chazav v'sheik shel shlam, which normally should be eaten l'shnei yom v'layla v'echad, so now you're going to be able to only eat it l'yem v'layla. The teida v'el nazar over here, the teida v'el nazar is minimizing the shlam, because it's causing that the shlam could only be eaten liyem v'layla. And v'lei mura mishlam shel emesh im chatus v'ashim shel hayim. So you have a shlamim shel emesh, you have a chazav v'sheik of yesterday. Now that could only be eaten today. It can't be eaten for the following night. Now you have a chatus v'ashim shel yem. Now by cooking a shlomim shel emesh with the chatas v'osham shel hayim, you're causing two hagbolas. Say you're causing, the chatas v'osham is causing a hagbola in the shlomim, that now the shlomim cannot be eaten lebaskein or lebaskein or to Aisha's Kain or to Evet Kain, and it could also only be eaten by Zara. That's causing, so that's what the Chatas V'Osham is causing on the Shlomim. Now the Shlomim is causing a Hagbala on the Chatas V'Osham, because the Chatas V'Osham Ba'etzim could be eaten also the following night. Mashenga the Shlomim, since it's this, now it's this, the Shlomim Shalemesh, so it can't be eaten the following night. That's what he's saying. V'lei muram mishlomim shalemesh im Chatas V'Osham shal yem mipnei shemamayit beichleim. You're mamayit in who could eat it, because the chatas noshim could only be eaten by zichri kuna, and also became machilosan. You've been mamayit that could only be eaten the azara, and now you've been mizmayit nachilosan. You've been mamayit in the chatas v'osham. In other words, the first one that the shlomim, the chatas v'osham were being mamayit in the shlomim, b'negeya oichleim ubimkei machilosan, and now the shlomim are being mamayit in the chatas v'osham b'zman achilosan. So that's Mamela, that would be a problem. So again, so you can't cook Chatas V'Osham with a Murim B'Teidev El Nazir, that's obviously from that day, and you can't cook a Murim B'Teidev El Nazir with a Pcher, or with a Chazav V'Sheik Shalom, because again you're being Ma'id Zman Achilosim, and you can't cook a Murim Mishlom Shalemesh in a Chatas V'Osham of today. Aval, Chatas V'Osham, Mizbashtum Zeh V'Zeh, they were both cooked today, obviously, or else it would be Neser. Chatas V'Osham, Mizbashtum Zeh V'Zeh, and also the Teidev El Nazir Zem Zeh. V'Hapcher, V'Chazav V'Sheik is also Zem Zeh. They all have the same din. Now, that's din number one. So the din is you're not allowed to cause that anything should be mugbal, say in the place where it eats it, and say in the zman that it eats it, and say how long it could be eaten. You're not allowed to be magbal. But if it's not being magbal by cooking it together, it's not being magbal. It's not a problem. Now we're learning another din. Chaticha shel kodesh kadoshim. If you have a piece of kodesh kadoshim, eshe pigol sheneser, the Mishnah says that pigol neser is also talking about kodesh kadoshim, which is pigol neser. Now shenizbashla im chatichas acheres, it was cooked with other pieces of meat. Is oisun hachatichas is asuris lezorim. They're also lezorim because we're talking about kodesh kadoshim, and kodesh kadoshim is also lezorim. But they're mutar l'kein. Now, this kodesh kadoshim, which is pigul neser, so if it's kodesh kadoshim mamish, obviously it's mutar l'kein. Why not? But if it's pigul neser is osir. It's osir l'kein. Now the vart is because the pigul and the neser became bottle. So we're talking about chaticha shel kodesh kadoshim, a shel pigul shel neser that became bottle, which was bastel chatichas acheres, it was bottle b'shishim lamazon, it was bottle. So memela, since it's bottle, so therefore a kohen is allowed to eat it. If a kohen is allowed to eat it, so why shouldn't a Yisrael be allowed to eat it? So it's brought down. I mean, the Rambam doesn't say it. It's brought down that since, just like by Truma there's a din that it's only bottle be'echad u'meya, so al there is a kotshim, in order to become bottle, it would need echad u'meya. So memela you have to say pshat hazeh. Chaticha shel kodesh kadoshim, that was nizbashel chatichas acheres, it was only shishim. So Mele mitzad the isur pigul v'neser becomes batal b'shishim. Mashad mitzad the isur of kotshim liyisrael, that is not enough that it should become us with shishim, and that you need echad u'meya, just like you would need for truma, and therefore there are also lezorim. Isna chatichas asuris lezorim umutaris lekenim. It's not so clear in the Rambam. I mean, you would be able to learn that maybe b'chlal kotshim is not batal. In other words, since the kohen can eat it, and the kohen doesn't have to come on to the bittul of the kotchim because he's mutter b'kotchim. So the zor is not allowed to eat it. But that's how the mefarshim learn pshat. Nachamo. So if you have a chaticha of kodesh kadoshim that was mixed in with other chatichas, and there's bashlim chatichas acheres le'af chulin, so there's two problems over there. First of all, it's kotchim. There's an union of kotchim, and there's pigul and neser. So the fact that it's pigul and neser, so that's a isur, that's batul, because batul b'shishim. And therefore, and the fact that it's kotchim is not a problem for Canaan. It's not a problem for Canaan because Canaan are allowed to eat kodesh kadoshim. They're allowed to eat the kodesh kadoshim aspect of it. So in other words, we have a pigul and noiser of kodesh kadoshim, and we're looking at this pigul v'neser, and we're saying like there's two inyanim over here. There's one inyan that it's kotchim, and there's another inyan that it's pigul v'neser. So the pigul v'neser aspect of it, that's batul, because batul b'shishim. The kachim aspect of it is the Kohanim don't need a bittul because the Kohanim are allowed to eat it. Masha'engin the Yisrael is not allowed to eat it because it's kachim. Besides the fact that it's pigul v'nesa, it's also kachim, and that wouldn't be enough. The bittul b'shishim, it needs the bittul b'echad u'meir. Halacha Yud Gimel. Psar kachim kadoshim. A psar kachim kalim. Shenizbashel psar taiva that became cooked with chulin is harei psar hataiva asul l'tmeim. Because since the psar hataiva absorbed from the kachim, so therefore it's asul l'tmeim because of the kachim. A tummy is not allowed to eat kachim. So the psar hataiva absorbed kachim, so it becomes out that it's asul l'tummy. The tummy is not allowed to eat kachim. Umutter l'teir, but a Torah is mutter. Why? What's the chidush? L'chur it's pasha that a Torah is mutter. But the ma'aseh is that there is a din that kachim that touch chulin, the kachim becomes tummy. The kachim that touches chulin, the kachim becomes tummy. So there would be a svara that the chulin is absorbing tummy dika kachim, absorbing tummy dika kachim. So l'chura, how you're allowed to eat it, even if you're a Torah, but l'chura you're absorbing tummy dika kachim. So that's the chiddush. The chiddush is that even though no one is allowed to eat that psar kachim anymore, because that psar kachim has a din midrabanan that it's tummy because it touched psar chulin, but legabe the absorption of that psar tummy in the psar chulin, that we don't consider an iser legabe the blia, and therefore a tar dika koyin is allowed, or a tar dika person is allowed to eat this psar chulin. No nachma. Psar chulin that absorbs psar kachim, a tummy person is not allowed to eat. Now, psar chulin that absorbs psar kachim, that psar kachim touched psar chulin, so memela that psar kachim had a din of tummy. You weren't allowed to eat that psar kachim. But the absorption of that psar kachim is not usher. Memela a Torah, the kakayin is allowed to eat that psar chulin, even though it absorbed psar kachim, which was tummy midrabon. Halacha Yudala. Nama ba'oila oir ha'oila asher hikriv lakein le'yeh. That the oir ha'oila that asher hikriv lakein le'yeh should be to the kain. The number bechatas hakoyin ha'machates yichlana, the achilas hachata should be the kain that was machates. The number ba'alshon hakein asher yichaper bei le'yeh. The number b'shlomim lakein hazerik is now hashlom le'yeh, which means he gets the chaz of a sheikh. The number b'mincha lakein ha'makriv eisi le'tiyah. So it sounds like the person that's actually makriv, he's the one that gets it. So on that, the Rambam says, "Ein hakosev b'daber b'chol elu elu b'roi." Doesn't mean the person that actually is makriv it. He's the one that gets it. It means someone that's roi to makriv. Shakoyin haroi laveda zeu sheyesh lechelik lechel. He has a chelik lechel. Aber misha ein roi b'shas hakorban kegein shehoy yitame ein lechelik lechel. Afilu k'shiyit even though the pill at night he'll become tor. And at that point in time, he'll be able to eat. But Lepel, since B'shas HaKrav HaKarban, he was tummy, so therefore he's not entitled to a chelik in this carbon. Aval le'inyin chaluka is hakel la'anshi beis av shemakrivim beis hayem. It's not, doesn't depend who actually did the hakrava. It belongs to the entire beis av. V'kulam chelkim b'chol kochi hamikdash ish ge'achiv. They all divided equally. Bein zeh shehikriv, bein achiv she'ima b'mikdash lehikriv. They all divided equally. In other words, the entire beis av, they all divided equally, regardless who was makriv and who wasn't makriv. If you look in the pasuk, you'll see a difference of how the Torah speaks about dividing the menachas or afuyas, the baked menachas, as opposed to mincha selis, a mincha that comes as selis. Sharei b'afuyas u'emer kol mincha asher ti'ofer batanur lakein ha'makriv eiselitir. It says clearly, Nachamol kol mincha asher ti'ofer batanur lakein ha'makriv eiselitir. So it says it belongs to the kain. V'mincha selis u'emer v'chol mincha b'lulav hashemen v'chareva l'chol b'nei Aaron tia ish ge'achiv. So over there, b'negei mincha b'lulav hashemen, which wasn't baked, it was a mincha that was b'lulav hashemen, or v'chareva, if there was no shemen, because we're talking about mincha seita, which has no shemen, is l'chol b'nei Aaron tia ish ge'achiv. So why is it that b'negei the afuya it says lakein ha'makriv eiselitia? We just learned that be'emes everything was divided equally to everybody. All the karbanos were divided equally to everyone. So why is it that by the mincha asher ti'ofer batanur the Torah writes lakein ha'makriv eiselitia, and by the mincha of selis over there the Torah clearly writes that it belongs to all of them. L'chol b'nei Aaron tia ish ge'achiv. Sha'afuya k'shechil k'neisan shebesav. Because by the afuya that you're going to divide it equally is kol she'agia lichel ki'afilu k'zayis pas arei roile shari echle miyad. So therefore, there's no need to specify that each person should get it, because it's obviously, since we know the rule is that all menachas, all the kachim, everyone gets. So who adin a mincha that was baked, everyone gets. So the Torah didn't have to write specifically that when the mincha was baked, everyone should get it. Just like the Torah writes, all the other things, the er ha'ela and the chatos and the oshim, the Torah only writes hakena machata esi yechlena, and we learn out that it means the entire beisav. So al derezeh the mincha shetiyafa batan, even though it says lakena makra ve'esalitia, we understand that it means it's given to all of the kenim. We give it to all of the kenim. Kol she'yagil ichalke afilu harei roilo sharei echle miyad. So therefore, there was no need to specify. Aval haseilus. But by seilus, im yichalku b'neiim, if you're going to take the seilus and you start dividing the seilus b'neiim, is nimsa magia lezeh malei kapi seilus ipachas. Everyone is going to get a spoonful or a handful of seilus. She'en roy lei lo l'sheisi. What's he going to do with that seilus? He's not going to be able to knead it v'lei la facing. Leficha choye eila ladas. There would have been a svara sheyechalku mincha k'meged mincha over there by mincha seilus. It would have been a strong svara to say that you don't divide the mincha amongst the entire beisav, because if you're going to divide the mincha amongst the entire beisav, no one will get anything which is substantial, and therefore v'liyachalku mincha zu b'fnei atzma al kol anshe b'yav. So therefore hutzrach hakasav leimar bo l'chol b'nei adam tia ishkeochav leimar sheyechalku b'fnei atzma. So the Torah over there b'negeh the mincha seilus, where over there would have been a starker svara to say that you don't divide the entire mincha seilus the kol beisav, because what will everyone get? But here you'd rather divide one mincha for another mincha. No, this cane will get this mincha, and the other cane will get another mincha. So here the Torah said no, that even when again mincha seilus, where there would be a svara to say differently, but lepeil is chol b'nei adam tia ishkiyochav. And mikan amru chacham, as ein chelkin mincha keneged mincha. You never chelik a mincha keneged mincha. You know, even when you have two menachas, l'chura the same mincha, in l'chura you'll say, why do I have to take this machvas and divide half to him and half to him? Let me give one to him and him to him. I feel a ma'isa machvas keneged ma'isa machvas, a seilus keneged seilus, so l'kol achas v'achas chelkin shireh b'fnei atzma. So you all divide, every single carbon is divided, the entire carbon amongst everyone in the beisav is nachama. So there's psukim that seem to say that the person that actually does it gets the carbon. Another Rambam says, no, that's not the pshat. That the entire beisav gets the carbon. So even though the pasuk sounds like the person that does it, but it doesn't mean the person that does it means the person that was roy to do it. That excludes someone that was tummy. If he was tummy, then he wasn't roy. But as long as he was roy, he gets it. Now, b'negeh mincha, we notice that in the Torah, b'negeh the mafet taner, the Torah clearly says, like all the other korbanos, that the person that does it should get it. And b'negeh the seilus over there, the Torah specifies that it should be l'chol b'nei adam tiyeh ishkiyochav. What's the pshat? Why over here the Torah tackle specified? So that the Rambam says, because by b'negeh the mincha seilus, there would have been a svara that over here taka you shouldn't divide it equally amongst the beisav, because l'chura no one's going to get a substantial amount, an amount that's everyone's going to get a very, very minimal amount, and that's why the Torah says no. That's why the Torah over here specified that even over here there would be a svara to say differently, but nevertheless you should divide it equally. You should divide this entire mincha equally amongst the entire beisav, and you shouldn't start saying, let me give this mincha to one person and another mincha to another person. And from here we learn out that all menachas and all the karbanos, everything is always divided equally amongst the beisav. Halacha tezayin v'chein ein chilkin oif keneged oif. If you have an oif, so a small bird, nevertheless you don't say give one oif to one person, one oif to this person, or one oif to this group, or one oif to this group. No, you give the entire, each oif you divide equally amongst the entire beisav. V'lei chatos keneged chatos, and v'lei chazav v'sheik keneged chazav v'sheik. Elokol chelik v'chelik chilkin eisen b'neim b'shov. Each chelik you divide amongst the entire beisav b'shov. Halacha Yud Zayin. Ein hakotten chelik afilu b'kotchen kalb. He doesn't get a portion. The cotton doesn't get a portion even in kotchen kalb. Aval pi shemutar lachili kotchen kadoshim. He's allowed to eat even kotchen kadoshim. That's not a problem. But on the other end, he's not entitled to a portion. He's not entitled to a portion. We're saying the Beis Av, each person that's eligible to work in the Beis Av is entitled to a portion, but a cotton is not entitled to a portion. She's not entitled to any portion. Only the men are entitled to portions. She's entitled to eat. Well, her husband got it, or anyone got it. So if she's a Bas Kain, or she's an Ashes Kain, so then she's entitled to eat. But on the other hand, she's not entitled to a portion. Aval Balmum, a person that's a Balmum, Ben Kavua, Ben Aver, whether he's a Mum Kavua or he's a Mum Aver, Ben Shenelad, Ben Mum, Ben Shoyatam, Ben Nifsal, either way, is Choylik Shnamar. Shnamar Lechem Alikov, a specific pasuk, Lechem Alikov, Mikot Shagadashim Begem. So he has to be a person, so a Balmum gets a portion. Abavahushi, a Roy Lachila, only if he's Roy Lachila. Avalum Hoya Tommy, if he was Tommy while while the carbon was being nikrav, so he was tummy, is einechelik lechel. So here, even though a balmum is never really royal akrava, he's never royal akrava. So we learn like this: if he's not a balmum and he was tummy, so he's not entitled to a portion because he wasn't royal akrava. A balmum, there's a special pasuk that even though l'chura as a balmum is not royal akrava, but nevertheless lechem alikav mikach gadoshim yechol, so he's entitled to lechem. But on the other hand, if he was a balmum and he was tummy, so at that point in time he was ein roy lechel, he wasn't ein roy lachila, so then he's not entitled to a portion. So in other words, the fact that he's a balmum doesn't make him more entitled than someone that's not a balmum. Someone that's not a balmum also, if he was tummy, he's not entitled. And so we made a balmum as well, but a balmum, even though he's a balmum and he's ein roy lavid, but from that he's entitled to get a chelik in the kachim. The Kain Gadol is Eichel Shalei B'Chalukah. That's another thing, that a Kain Gadol is Eichel Shalei B'Chalukah. Elenoitel Kol Mashir, so he could take it. Everyone else is B'Chalukah. As we said, that you divide it equally to the entire Beis Av. Masha'ik, the Kain Gadol is Neikel Shalei B'Chalukah. Halacha Yutes. Kol HaRoy L'Achilas Kachim B'Shas HaKorban. So he is Chelik Lechel. If you're a Roy Lechel B'Shas HaKorban, you're Chelik Lechel. V'chol mi she'einu royal lechel b'shas ha'aveda is afal pi shehu royal aveda, even though he's royal aveda, but if his name is royal lechel, afal pi shehu royal aveda, and lepel by royal lechel erev, and lepel when it comes by erev he was a roy, but lepel b'shas ha'aveda he wasn't a royal lechel, is eini chelik kedei lo niachel keler. So nachamol, he has to be a roy lachilas hakochim b'shas hakorban. Mashenkin, if he wasn't a royal achilas korban kotshim b'shas hakorban, so Mimela, even though he would be royal aveda, he was a royal aveda b'shas hakrovas hakorban, he was royal achila at la'erev, but he wasn't a royal achila b'shas hakrovas hakorban. So Mimela is ein chelik de lo niachel kelerev. Now the Rambam is going to say it. To say in halacha ches, the only case of a person that's royal aveda but ain't a royal achila is only a kohen gadol. A kohen gadol that's an oinen, so he's allowed to do the aveda, but he's not allowed to eat. He's not allowed to do the he's allowed to do the aveda, but he's not allowed to eat. Now a kohen gadol that's an oinen, so midday rice is only oinen badei. Midrabanan he's also oinen the following night. That's only if we're dealing with the yom hamisa. Masha'inkan, if you're talking about the yom hakfura, so he's an oinen midrabanan on that day. And the following night is not going to be an oinen. So maybe you have a chatimtz of someone that's allowed to do the aveda. It's the Yom HaKfura. He's allowed to do the aveda. He's not allowed to eat, but he'll be able to eat the following night. The Rambam starts off with kol haroy, like as if there's more than one case. The Rambam starts again. Let's read again. Kol haroy lachilas hakochim b'shas hakorban. As long as you're roy lachilas hakochim, is choylek lechel. Avachol mishayin roy lechel b'shas aveda. If you're not roy, is aval bisha royal aveda and vareu royal lechel erev is ein chelik kedei laniach chelkel erev ketzat. Now tful yem u'mechusi kippurim. Now a tful yem and mechusi kippurim aren't roy lechel, and they're also not royal aveda. At that point in time, they're also not royal aveda. But it seems that they go into together ein a royal achila. They're not royal achila. Tful yem and mechusi kippurim, and also v'ha'oining b'yem hakvura, which memela he's at that point in time is ein roy lechel, but he could be roy laveda if he's a kohen gadol, and ben kohen gadol ben kohen gadol ben kohen hedid is ein chilkin lechel erev. Again, someone that's a Mechusi Kippurim, someone that's a Tful Yem, or someone that's an Oinen, even if it's a Oinen B'Yem HaKvura, so whether he's a Kohen Gadol or a Kohen Hedyot, so he's Eini Chelik Lechel Erev. Now, Kol She'eini Roi Lechel, B'chlal, the rule is, the Rambam says, if you Eini Roi Lechel, Eini Roi Lavit. So Memela, when you speak about a Tful Yem and a Mechusi Kippurim, there's no Metzias of someone that's Eini Roi Lechel and is Roi Lavit. Chutz Mikein Gadol Oinen, Shahu Makriv, Ve'ina Echel K'mei B'Yarnu. So Kohen Gadol, there could be Eichatim, so Kohen Gadol is an Oinen, so he's allowed to be Makriv, but he's Eina Echel. So that's really the only case where he's Roi Lavit and Roi Lechel. And then weiter, V'chol She'eini Roi Lavit, Eina Roi Lechel. B'chlal, someone that's Eina Roi Lavit, Eina Roi Lechel, Chutz Mibal Mum, Sharim Nesparish B'Teira, even though he's Eina Roi Lavit, but nevertheless he's Roi Lechel. So that's this din. So Memela, in order to be able to be Cholik L'Basar L'Chura, there's Arichus Advar. But L'Chura, the main thing is we know that if you're not Roi Lavit, so then you're not Cholik. If you're not Roi Lavit, you're not Cholik, except for a Balmum, which is Ein Roi Lavit, then he is Cholik. And if you're Ein Roi Lechel, you're also not Cholik. Who's this Ein Roi Lechel, which is Roi Lavit? That's a Kohen Gadol, which is Oinen, B'Yem HaKvura, so Memela he'll be Roi Lechel L'Erev. If he's not in Roi Lechel Erev, there's nothing to talk about. But he's going to be Roi Lechel Erev, but nevertheless, since B'Shas Maisa, B'Shas Taktori, he wasn't Roi Lechel, so therefore he doesn't get his Chilik. Halacha Chofalav. Kol she'ein le Chilik b'Basar is ein le Chilik b'Eiros. If he doesn't have a Chilik b'Basar, he's not Roi Lahakriv, so maybe he's not a Chilik b'Basar, so therefore ein le Chilik b'Eiros. Afilu Tomei B'Shas Rikas Dom. The Torah b'shas hekter chalav, so b'shas hekter chalav he was already Torah, is einei chelik b'basar. He doesn't have a right to the basar. Shnamar hamakriv is dam hashlam, v'sachel b'neyarin leisi ashek hayom lemona. So we learn out achiyeh toy v'roy laveda misha zrika ad acher hekter chalav. So a person, in order to be entitled to the basar, you have to be someone that was Torah from shas hazrika until acher hekter chalav. And if he wasn't Torah, so then he's not entitled to the basar, and huadin, he's not entitled to the oir. Now, nitma achar zrika, if there was the b'shas zrika, he was Torah, and nitma achar zrika, and then v'tovel, umvarihu Torah av b'shas hekter chalavim, is over here is adover sofikim chelik, because on one hand, he was Torah b'shas zrika, and on the other hand, he was also Torah b'shas hekter chalavim. It's just in between the Zrika and the Hekter Chalav, he was Tommy. So the question is, does he have to be Torah from the Zrika until the Hekter Chalav, or as long as he was Torah b'shas Zrika and b'shas Hekter Chalav? Is Adav Sofik im Chelik im Eine Chelik of Fichach im Tafas im Mitzim Miyadim? It's a moment is the Kashayla, so he's a Chelik of the Beisav. The question is he entitled to part of the Basar? So on that we say im Tafas im Mitzim Miyadim. That goes with the Shittas Aram, that anything that's a Sofik helps Tfisa. Halacha Chav Gimel, Korban Tzibur HaBabetuma, the Korban Tzibur which is Babetuma, is Afal Pi Shatmeim Makrivin Eisei, is Ein Chilkin Im HaTahirim Lechel Erev. So the Tmeim are not Chilkim, not Tahirim Lechel Erev. Mipnei She'enim Roi L'Achila, so Memela, they're not entitled. You have to be, in order to be entitled to the Basar, you have to be Roi L'Achila. So this is what we learned before, but together the Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol was entitled to do the Aveda, but he wasn't entitled to eat. And Memela, he's ein chelik b'basar. So there is these tmeim, which even though they were makravesi, why were they makravesi? Because it was a korban tzibur abobetuma. But nevertheless, when it comes la'erev, so Memela, they can't be chelik. Right now they're already Torah. Let's say they're Torah right now already. Nevertheless, in chilkim not tehirim lechel erev. Mipnei she'einam ruim lachila. They weren't royal lachila b'shas when they were makravet. Now the question sounds like the tehirim are going to eat it. So it says a chidush that a korban which is baba tumah, the Teirim are going to eat. And that the case Mishnah is that l'chura we have a rule that a korban that was baba tumah, called korban tzibur baba tumah, ain't in echel. Which we learned that in Hilchos Bias Mikdash, that a korban which is baba tumah is ain't in echel. So what's the shaila? The shaila if the tmeim that were makriv, that were sheichet, there was zerik, whether or not they're going to be chaylik lechel, no one's going to eat it. So on that they bring that the pshat is that when don't you eat a korban that's baba tumah if the basa became tummy? But if Lepel, the carbon was Baba Tumah, and the Basar, somehow or another, the people that were Makriv were Tummy, but they used the Krumi Shulkana, they used something that it didn't become the Basar, in other words, the Tummy shechted it, and the Tummy was eating the dam, but Lepel, the Basar never became Tummy. So then the Tehirim do eat it. So the Tehirim could eat it. Let's say if you have Tehirim, let's say you have Kenim that are Balimuma, they can't be Makriv the carbon, but they could eat it. Now the question is of the Tmeim that are now, they were Makrivit, and they were Makrivit, and they were Tmeim. And now tonight, at night, they're already not Tmeim, so let them eat a potato. So we say, no, since with Shaz they were Makrivit, they were not Roy Lechel, so Mamela, so Ein Chil Kalerev to eat it. So it comes out, they were Makrivit. And they were Roy to be Makrivit, because it was Betuma, but they weren't Roy Lechel. And the people that are going to eat it are the Tahirim, let's say the Bali Muma, which are Tahirim, they're going to eat it. So we said before, the Bali Mumana are entitled to eat it, because they're not considered ineligible, because Bali Mumana says beferish that they're entitled to eat it, and they were Tahirim. So the Tmeim that were Makrivit, and they weren't eligible to eat it, B'shas Maisa, they also are not eligible to receive a portion at night. And who receives the portion? The portion receives the Tahirim, in the case where the Basar didn't become Tamil.